What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you'll never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And I'm looking at this very alarming story that has just now come on out. Apparently, at this White House meeting with the entire Senate, President Trump himself was only there to make opening remarks. Then he left, and the briefing was given to the Senate by the National Security Team, the neocons. And I think this is a very strong indicator that, in point of fact, Donald Trump has been brought to heel, that he's not really running the show. And as I said, one of the rumors that I heard floating around when he began to reverse course on so many of his policies regarding wars was that he was told point blank, the war agenda is moving forward. All you can decide is if you will continue to be the president or we find some way to be rid of you. But for all the attention that was focused on this meeting with the senators, and then for Trump to only be there for 5 minutes to deliver opening remarks and then leaving, it's not his show. The coming war in North Korea is not his show. Now, do you remember back during the mortgage-backed security meltdown, one of the problems was that Wall Street's pet rating agencies had declared these mortgage bundles AAA, which is why so many pension funds were legally allowed to invest in them, and why so many pension funds were destroyed in the subsequent collapse. And apparently the rating agencies haven't really learned much from their past mistakes, because apparently Moody's is claiming the American retail industry is stable, ignoring the thousands of stores that have closed last year and the more than 8,000 closures planned for this year. But in Moody's, it's stable. You can go ahead and invest in it. Now, one of the biggest iconic brands in the world has to start cutting jobs, and we're talking about Coca-Cola. And they're getting ready to cut 1,200 jobs. They're having to cut costs because their sales are down. And like so many other companies, they're looking for a scapegoat to blame, rather than say our customers just don't have any money to buy this kind of stuff anymore. And so Coca-Cola is wagging their finger at that growing segment of the population that is concerned about healthy food and sugar and all that other stuff. This problematic health trend, it's cutting into the profits. We've got to find some way to undo it. And if you will remember, earlier in the week, we were talking about these news articles coming on out saying that people who were into healthy eating, it was a cult. That people who wanted to avoid processed food, that they were actually endangering their lives and health by eating these vegetables and farm fresh eggs and dairy products and stuff. No. The way to health is to just go on out and get that prepackaged goop that's in your supermarket shelves. It's all about protecting profitability. And yes, awareness of health issues may be part of it, but I really do think that we are seeing the effects of a population that has been impoverished by the money junkies and by the wartime economy, which is what we have been in for years now. And people don't have money to buy Coca-Cola all the time. More gold is pouring into China. In fact, they imported more than twice as much in March as had been the case in February. So Russia and China are stocking up on gold. They're going to be backing their BRICS trade currency with gold, and that, of course, is a big, big threat to the money junkies who believe in fractional reserve banking and money created out of thin air. Because when the economy starts to really shake, people are going to want a reliable store of value. And that piece of ink and paper, that's all it's worth, a piece of paper with ink on it. Meanwhile, there's a very interesting article over in the Daily Coin talking about silver. Now, everybody's always gold this and gold that. And yes, gold is kind of nice. But silver has actually been outperforming gold, and there's much more of it, which is probably why it was the monetary base for the U.S. dollar up until the creation of the Federal Reserve. And so this article is talking about silver being the money of the people. When fiat currencies fail, silver is going to be the way to go. And it's always been the recommendation of this program to our listeners and our readers that you should have some physical metal under your own control. Do not buy those paper contracts. They are way over leveraged. And when the panic hits, only the first people in will get their money out. And everybody else is going to be left holding a very impressive looking piece of paper. And that's going to be it. So you definitely want silver and gold. And a good way to get into silver without paying numismatic value, which is driven by fashion, is what's so-called junk silver, which are pre-1964 coins in the U.S., which actually contain silver. And you can buy them by the pound, literally, places like eBay. And the advantage to that is, if the dollar does collapse, those coins are known units of value. People recognize them. And so when you go down to fill up your gas tank on the car, instead of charging you $4.50 per gallon in the inflated Federal Reserve notes, they're going to charge you 25 cents a gallon in the real silver, which is what gas prices used to be. But it's a known, recognized unit of monetary value, which is going to come really in handy as a medium of exchange when people lose faith, trust, and belief in paper with ink all over. Now remember, when the United States first started, the paper notes were not the money. They were claim checks. The money was the silver content and gold content of the coinage. And those paper notes were claim checks. It said right on the front, you can redeem this note, this claim check, for lawful money at the bank. And that meant you would take that paper silver certificate, $1, and you'd take it on down, and you would get 4 silver quarters for it. If you look at a modern Federal Reserve note, that's not there anymore. The Federal Reserve note is the money. And it's all make-believe. It's a fairy tale. Now, Fannie Mae is introducing innovative solutions to allow student debt-laden millennials to buy a home. Yes, even though you're struggling to pay your student loans, we have a new way for you to get a mortgage. In other words, they're bringing back the subprime mortgages. They didn't learn anything from 2008 because the people who did that didn't have to pay for it. You did. With TARP, bailouts, and QE. Because under fascism, the poor are always made to pay for the mistakes and greed of the rich. Now, here is a very alarming story, and it tells you just how strained everything has become all over the West. Over in Great Britain, they have school lunch programs. If you're below a certain level of income, you actually get free school meals during the school year. The problem is, on vacation, these kids are having to go hungry because their families can't afford to buy food. Food prices are going up, and these kids are basically getting by eating potato chips and drinking energy drinks, and that's it. And that's hardly a nutritious meal. Now, another article from Investment Watch blog. The election economic surge has faded. Everybody thought Donald Trump was really going to fix things. Now, he has come out with his new tax plan, and it's tax cuts for businesses and corporations. He did take out some of the loopholes the ultra-rich can use, which is a good thing. But it's not really going to help get more money into the hands of ordinary Americans so that they can spend it back into the economy. And so the enthusiasm, the Trump bump, has faded. And the numbers are all looking, they're in dangerous territory. Red flags everywhere, all these bubbles. The IMF is now out there saying Greece needs to sacrifice more than they already have. Those bankers at the European Central Bank and the IMF and the World Bank, they're having to go to bed with only another couple of $1 million, and they're suffering so hard in their homes and their palaces. Let's see. After almost a year, the Caterpillar company has finally had a week that hit 1% sales, and it's mostly China. China's buying a lot of Caterpillar equipment. They're doing a lot of building over there. But the economy is clearly declining. Actually, it's more or less been in a continuous decline since 2008. And all this talk of recovery in the sky-high stock market is basically a smokescreen. Because we know the stock market is being artificially run up so it can be used as a political banner. And that was started by President Bill Clinton, and every president since then has been forced to go along with that. Because they really don't have all that much else that they can wag at you to make you think everything is okay. We know they're fudging the inflation numbers. We know they're fudging the unemployment numbers. We could be very, very, very close to the edge. And again, that's another reason why they're rushing to get into a world war, because they think a world war will fix the economy, because, hey, it worked the last 2 times. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, World War III. Except it didn't really make things better. It certainly resulted in full employment because huge numbers of our people were over in other countries, killing people and being killed in return. And there was a buildup of industry for the war machine, but in the long run, we incurred a lot more debt. Because the bankers, they love the wars. War is the bankers' richest harvest of debt. And they don't care which side wins or loses, because they loan money to both sides to fight the war, and when the war is over, they loan them more money to rebuild after the war, and when it's all over, when this giant scam is all over, ordinary people like you and I, we have more or less what we had before, except the graveyards are a lot bigger, and we're back on the hook as debt slaves to the central bankers for another 100 years. Now, Trump has apparently backed off on his pledge to end Obamacare. They're still debating it, modifying it. Apparently, the plans being put forward are basically Obamacare light. There are cosmetic changes and not much else. It's still a giveaway to the health insurance industries. But the system is starting to break down. West Virginia has ended their state-run Obamacare exchange. Last Friday, Governor Jim Justice signed a bill to shut down the state-run Obamacare health insurance exchange. And basically, they're going to be withdrawing from the national health care program because it did not make health care affordable. It actually made it more expensive. A lot of people are finding that it's actually cheaper to pay cash for their medical needs. And there is a whole new crop of medical care facilities, doctors and clinics that are operating on a cash-only basis without insurance. And that means they can offer lower prices. See, the way it works, if you are a doctor or a hospital and you are accepting insurance from a particular company, that company will come on in and say, you have to give us a discount on the services that you offer in order to sign the contract. But because you accept our insurance, that will bring more customers through the door. And in order to maintain profitability, these hospitals and doctors will raise their prices for the care and services. That's one of the reasons why the costs of medical care have gone through the roof and are the highest in the world. Because if they're accepting the insurance, they're not actually getting that much money. So if you don't have insurance or you haven't met your deductible, that's why you're having to pay so much. So there's this whole new cadre, if you will, of doctors and clinics who are cash only, no insurance, and they're able to operate at much lower prices. Obviously, the health insurance company doesn't want you to know about them, which is why this is not getting a lot of coverage in corporate media. But it is a growing trend. It is a growing trend. article coming out of Investment Watch blog, is the Trump tax plan a sign of better days to come? Well, they're focused on this idea of corporate tax rates being cut from 39.6%, which is arguably high in the world market, down to 15%. The question is, what are these businesses going to do with the extra cash? Are they going to hire more people? Are they going to offshore? Are they going to just put it in their pockets as bonuses? We're in an age where the poor are getting poorer and the rich are buying robots. And that doesn't seem to me to be a harbinger of better times for all Americans. Now, Craig Hemke is out there saying that the Trump feel-good financial narrative is crumbling. That right now our markets are being held together with electronic baling wire and digital chewing gum. Much of what you think you know about what's going on with the economy is an illusion. 5% unemployment. No, there isn't. We've got over 90 million Americans willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. Meanwhile, of course, the refugees are getting free handouts. The military spending is increasing. Speaking of refugees, apparently up at the European Union, the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, basically uncorked on the Eurocrats and the members of the European Parliament in this verbal assault over the EU's meddling in his country's internal affairs. And he basically tore into Brussels and basically said, we are really irritated by the verbal straitjacket which stops us from calling a spade, and this kind of talk has become very common in European public life recently. And what he's talking about there is how the EU is trying to impose restrictions on language on various issues, first and foremost, the refugee problem. There is a problem. The EU's solution is not to let anybody talk about it. But it is there. Story out of Sputnik News. The latest German crime figures show surge in violent crime by migrants. And apparently an increase in murder, manslaughter, 12% increase in rape and sexual assault. But you're not allowed to talk about it. That's how they're going to fix everything. You can't talk about the problem. You know, that was the way the old Soviet Union used to operate. When bad things were happening, wasn't mentioned in the press. We don't talk about it. That ultimately led to the downfall of the Soviet Union. It was a contributing factor because of Chernobyl. Because while Europe was seeing their radiation meters spike, and everybody knew something had gone horribly wrong somewhere inside Russia, the Soviet government was saying, no, we're all fine. Everything's fine here, and nothing was reported to the Russian people. And when they found out that, yes, there had been a disaster at Chernobyl, people had been exposed to radiation, and the government was covering it up, that was one of the nails in the coffin of the Soviet Union. Because you can only lie to your people so long before it catches up with you. And that's a lot of what's going on here in the United States as well. Now, getting on back to this, you will not say certain things. Apparently, Mayor Robert Menard, he's mayor of a French city, he's been found guilty of a thought crime for saying schools with 91% Muslim students have become a problem. And apparently the fact that they are a problem is irrelevant. You're just not allowed to talk about it. And that seems like a bit of tyranny and dictatorship there as well. Now, Austrian and German officials admit they are going to have to keep their border controls. They say we must know who's coming here, and they're extending their border controls indefinitely. The open borders, Schengen, is now whittling away. The EU experiment has failed. Of course, the real goal of the EU was to build a component for the eventual New World Order, but it's falling apart. They don't know what to do about it. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're going to go take a phone call here. Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir.
Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, you see, sir, I just want to ask you something. yesterday you talked about an issue that reminded me of what I researched about almost 20 years ago when I was in high school. You were talking about World War I.
Yes.
And sir, you said, sir, according to my research, and also like I went to university after that, and I got a degree in history and everything, so I take history really seriously. So, sir, according to my research, Woodrow Wilson won the election in 1916 because he said he's not going to intervene in World War I, and then he intervened in 1917 because of the Germans attacked the ship and sunk, and also because of the Zimmerman telegram.
You're absolutely right. Woodrow Wilson campaigned on keeping the United States out of the Europe War, and then the Lusitania was set up to be a bloody shirt. The fact is that the United States, despite being officially neutral in the European war, was smuggling weapons to Great Britain, and the Germans knew that they were doing that. In fact, the German government actually took out ads in the New York newspapers warning people not to sail on the Lusitania, because since she was carrying weapons to Great Britain, it was a legitimate target of war. And the Lusitania was sent into an area where they knew there were all kinds of German U-boats. She did not have any escorts, and she was set up to be sunk. And then they used that to anger the American people into saying, well, we wanted to stay out of Europe, but obviously we have to go on in there and give those Germans what for, which is kind of weird because World War I actually began between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, but it swung over to Germany because Germany was an economic threat to Great Britain and the United States.
So sir, what I was told, so like the research that I did was correct then?
Yeah, I just filled in a couple of blank spots.
Okay. Because so like from what I understood is that like maybe I've heard it from somebody on RBN. I don't remember. Like maybe I'm confusing you with another host. That the ship was sunk by Americans themselves, so they could use that to attack Germany.
No, that you didn't hear that from me.
Okay. I must have heard it from another host then. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Fred in Iowa. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
You know that lady had called in the first hour about calling the government comment lines anyhow, 202-456-1111.
Yes.
Well, I come up with an idea and a solution, and I'd like to give it, and two reasons why it probably won't work after that. If we could get 1 million callers, I don't know if 100,000 callers would work. It's called the President, the Dog Catcher, mainly our senators and congressmen, state and U.S., and tell them to stop the wars, stop invading countries that do nothing to us. But here is the problem. People probably wouldn't do that, but if we could get it started.
Hello, you fading out on me.
Here, can you hear me okay now?
Yes, I hear you now, but for a while you were sort of fading off into the twilight zone.
Yeah.
You know, at this point, the fact is that for whatever reason, corruption, blackmail, coercion, going with the flow, groupthink, whatever, it is very obvious that our politicians simply aren't listening to the American people. And that's because they get their money from large corporate donors and they get their votes from election fraud, so they don't feel they have to listen to us anymore.
Right. Well, that's correct. I'm not arguing that point. You're right on.
All right. Well, Fred, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to do another commercial break, and we'll be right back. We're going to close the phone.
Hold me over.
All right. I'll hold you over, but you're going to be the last call for the day. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Fred, you had one more comment you wanted to make. Fred, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine. What is on your... You had one more thing you wanted to say.
Yeah, I'll try to talk fast. I'm not good at that. Anyhow, our economy is a war-based economy. The military-industrial complex, if I have my figures right, is more valuable than the 50 top corporations in America, or the 50 countries, GPD, anyhow, gross domestic product. But, so, that would be a problem. But we could really start bringing the troops home by degree. And I know I can't talk very much and explain this, and it pisses me off that I have to talk in sound bites. Okay, thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
All right, Fred, thank you very much. We're going to let you go, and we're closing the phone lines for the rest of the show because I'm way, way behind on the talking points. Getting on back to the war, I'm very distressed to see they're already ramping up the propaganda on Iran. Even though the White House has said that Iran is in compliance with the P5+1, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, which is the group that wants to get Iran's government replaced with themselves, is out there insisting Iran has cheated and that they're weaponizing nuclear weapons even as we speak. So they're ramping up weapons of mass destruction again. Lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. How many more times are you going to have to be lied to until you're ready to stand up and scream at these people, you are full of it, and I am not listening to you anymore? Don't just think it, say it. Put some force, drama behind it, if you will. Okay, now, article coming out of another one from Investment Watch blog. Basically, as you know, the Democrats were threatening to force a government shutdown if money for a border wall was included in the bill to fund the government. And we're talking about a microscopic amount out of the total budget. But the liberal Democrats and the globalists, they don't want any walls. They want everybody moving everywhere else to erase the memories of nations and regions and history and culture. Just turn it into one pureed blop of humanity that doesn't have any idea who they are so that they're easier to control. And sure enough, it looks like Donald Trump has backed down and will sign the emergency spending bill without the money for the wall. And I remember yesterday we got a phone call from somebody who was responding to my criticisms of the president by saying, well, you know, some things are more important to other people. The immigration wall was the most important thing to me, and he's doing a great job on that. Wrong. What's really angering a lot of people is Speaker Paul Ryan wants to fund Planned Parenthood in this emergency spending bill, but not the Trump border wall. Now, Ted Cruz has another idea. He wants to basically take $14 billion in seized drug lord assets and spend that on the wall. That sounds like a good idea. And apparently the fact that Trump has caved on the border wall, Rush Limbaugh was very upset about that, and I can understand why. Now, amazingly enough, corporate media is finally acknowledging the long history of CIA involvement in drug trafficking. And apparently the History Channel, and the same people that had America's Book of Secrets that I was on a few years back, is doing this series, America's War of Drugs. Not on drugs, of drugs. And it goes through the last 5 decades, showing how the CIA has been involved in drug running, drug dealing, and allows the drug trade in this country for political alliances and also because it's a big moneymaker. And remember, that whole Bush-Clinton cartel goes all the way back to that CIA operation out of Arkansas in the mid-1980s. Manufactured guns without serial numbers down to the Nicaraguan Contras, and it was all funded by cocaine pouring back into the United States over the same smuggler pipeline. And everybody got very, very rich, and a lot of our children got hurt by that cocaine, and anybody who stood in their way got their lives destroyed. Now, apparently up in Berkeley, things are really getting crazy. I remember Berkeley in the 60s, where the idea of freedom of speech, that we have a right to criticize the war in Vietnam, that was That was the mainstay of political discourse, and now it's all political correctness, and we don't want to hear this, and we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear Ann Coulter. Okay, stay home. Nobody is forcing them to go in and listen to Ann Coulter, but as of the last word, Coulter has canceled her trip to Berkeley because of all the violence that's going on. And my question is, a lot of those students up at Berkeley are descending into student loan debt. What kind of jobs are they going to get when all they seem to be learning how to do is yell, scream, fight each other, and scream political correctness? There's not a big career future in that sort of thing. Or liberal arts as a whole. How many art history majors are you going to find actually getting jobs with that degree? Poor United Airlines, they cannot get a break. And I'm sure the only reason this story made the headlines is because United Airlines has had this horrible, horrible string of luck. And apparently there was a world record giant rabbit was being transported in the cargo hold of a Boeing 767 from London to O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, and the bunny arrived dead. And apparently this was an attempt to deliver this giant rabbit to a purchaser. Obviously that deal has now gone off, and United Airlines is saying, well, we regret it. We do try and take care of the animals that are shipped in the cargo hold. And we don't know what happened. Maybe the rabbit just got terrified of all the noise. Maybe the cargo hold wasn't as well pressurized. Maybe it wasn't warm enough. We don't know. Animals do die in those cargo holds. And that is a reality. The original Chihuahua for one of the snack food things, the original one actually died that way, and they had to get a look-alike dog for the subsequent commercials here. I almost have to wonder who's been shorting United Airlines stock, because United does seem to have been hit with a lot of negative publicity, and it is adversely affecting their stock price. All right, there has been another incident where SWAT has hit the wrong address. They broke into the wrong home, wrong address. There was a prayer group. They thought they were going to find gun thieves. They detained a 14-year-old girl in the bathroom. And the Carroll County Sheriff's Office in Gaithersburg is admitting they got it all wrong when they burst into this home. And apparently the homeowner, had the same name as the man police were searching for in a gun theft case. But incredibly, Carroll County got a warrant to search the wrong address. And they broke up a prayer meeting. Ridiculous. And, adding fuel to the fire, this is being reported from the Free Thought Project. Apparently there was an altercation where police beat up an 83-year-old man. And as is usual, there are two different stories. Now, the man in question, Larry Sevinsky, owns a bar in this town. And it was St. Patrick's Day, and everybody was, having a good time. And somebody came on and said, the police are out there just looking to see if they can spot drunk drivers leaving so they can write tickets and make money. So he goes out to talk to them, and there's an altercation, and they wind up beating him up. Now, the police are claiming he came at them with threats and anger and everything, and he's saying no, that it was just, he was just trying to ask them what they were doing here. He wound up with a shattered elbow and a bloody nose. And everybody said, all right, well, let's look at the dash cam footage of what happened. But it was mysteriously deleted due to a technical failure. And that is also something that seems to be epidemic. When the dash cams don't support the police officer's version of the truth, there's a technical error. There's a technical error. Now, down under in Queensland, along the Gold Coast, they have, unfortunately, a very high crime rate. The crime statistics are not very good, and it's actually affecting tourism to the area. And so the Gold Coast police have hit on a way to make the crime statistics look a lot better. And that is they're literally going out to victims of crime and asking them to retract their complaints. So they will not be in the system and counted for the overall crime record. This is a growing trend. Yeah, there's a problem. We can't fix the problem, but we're gonna make it look better. We're going to paper it over. Yeah, there's high crime along the Gold Coast, but if we tell people not to report it, it'll look better for the tourists. Yeah, the refugees are causing all kinds of problems over Europe, and we can't do a thing about all the rapes and robberies and murders and everything, but we can forbid people from talking about it. Or in Germany, they can literally order the newspapers to not report when refugees are the perpetrators in crime. Yeah, we got a problem with the Fukushima meltdown, but we'll just tell everybody it's okay. It's only a steam explosion. Up in the Northland, Minnesota, they're still having school closings, canceled classes today because of snow and freezing rain in the region. And despite this, Al Gore's people are out there demanding trillions of dollars to fight human-caused global warming. Now, one of the main proponents for human-caused global warming and for fluidity of gender and various other things was Bill Nye. He was the son of Louis Nye, the comedian, and he likes to call himself Bill Nye, the science guy. But a lot of people have criticized his shows as not being very scientific at all. And apparently his show on Netflix has now been dropped. So, Bill has been sent to the woodshed, as Ryan Dawson likes to say. All right, let's talk about computers here. Apparently, Google is launching yet another attack on fake news and problematic content. See, they're not even calling it fake news anymore. It's problematic content. Content that somebody who's rich and powerful doesn't want to get on out there. They're calling it Project Owl, and it's a three-pronged attack. And one of the prongs is apparently Google is, again, rewriting their algorithm to bury what they declare to be fake news in search results. Basically, what they're trying to do is bias it toward the official corporate stories get served up first, and then if you go down a few pages, you might see some alternative independent voices. But Google has become a gatekeeper. They, not you, will decide what you're going to see, hear, and read. In fact, Google is beginning to remind me of this TV series back in the 50s, The Outer Limits. Had the theremin and the oscilloscope as an opening title here. There was the control voice. We will control all you see and hear. Sounds like Google to me. Now, AT&T has been caught launching a fake 5G network in a desperate attempt to seem innovative. They're calling it the 5G evolution, and it's been exposed. It's not actually a new 5G network. It's just a rebranded 4G offering to try and lure customers. And, you know, they did that before. I remember here in Hawaii when 4G was first coming out on the smartphones, and AT&T started advertising they had a 4G system. And, yes, your 4G system would link with it, but it was operating at 3G speeds. We live in an age where everything's a scam, everything's a lie, everything's a fake. Now, hackers have uncorked an experimental malware targeting Linux. It's called the Linux Shishiga malware, and it's basically going after Linux-based systems, which is a niche market. And most Linux-based systems are not being used for things like business or accounting, but apparently somebody feels they need to have a way to get in there. And basically ESET, which is the security company that found them, said that basically you should never use default Telnet and Secure Shell credentials, because this malware apparently has a password list that it uses to try a brute force attack. And the only way to be immune is to not have one of those default passwords. And that is something you should all be aware of, even on your router. When you get a router home from the store and you set it up, there's that little URL you can go to for the control panel. And there's a password. And a lot of people just use the password that's supplied with it. And it's a default password, and you can even find out what it is going online. What is the default password for the blah, 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 blah router, and you will find pages that have it. And hackers can reach your router from the outside, and if they have that password, they can get on in. So if you have a router and you have not changed that router password, that is your homework for the night. You need to do that. Because it's open season on computer users by the cyber criminals, by the government, by everybody. And yes, apparently some of that leaked NSA spyware is already being detected in the hands of cyber criminals. Now, Julian Assange has come on out with a verbal assault in response to the CIA's talk about having him arrested and he's a danger. And he's basically saying the CIA is waging war on truth-tellers. And yes, that's true. People who live by the lie cannot stand anybody who tells the truth. They absolutely hate it. They don't know what to do with it, other than to silence it. Burn the heretics. And basically Assange is saying that the Trump administration's vow to crack down on WikiLeaks is because officials are embarrassed that their own failings are being exposed for the public to see. And their failings ought to be exposed for the public to see. When they violate the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the American people ought to know. Now, the Federal Communications Commissioner, Ajit Pai, has revealed he's going to roll back the net neutrality rules put in place by Obama back in 2015. And basically, this is going to lead to an Internet with a fast lane for people with the money to pay, and it will allow ISPs to change the priority of various websites. And I can imagine that's going to make it even more difficult for people to get to whatreallyhappened.com or Republic Broadcasting. And this is so contrary to the principles established for other means of communication like radio and TV and telephone. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. Somebody went on out and did a survey, and this is over in Japan, where the government is now trying to get all the people who evacuated from the area around that Fukushima disaster to basically go back home, farm the land, do jobs, pay taxes, act as if everything is okay. And they're really out there saying that conditions in the prefecture are good. Yeah, they're good. That's our official word. It's good now. And to nobody's surprise, 80% of the Fukushima evacuees do not want to go back there. Not going to be able to fool them on that one. Now, as you know, there's a lot of secrecy about nuclear tests. And apparently France carried out their first nuclear test in North Africa. And the French daily Le Parisien found a recently declassified military map that showed the fallout from the detonation of France's first nuclear bomb spread well beyond what was admitted to at the time. Apparently Algeria, the whole Saharan region was contaminated, reached the island of Sicily and the southern Spanish coast. One of the worst accidents in the U.S. testing involved a bomb that was much larger than expected, and it contaminated a Japanese fishing boat. And the U.S. government did not tell the government of Japan this is what had happened to the fishing boat. And the fishing boat went back to Japan, and the crew was very sick, and they didn't know what was wrong with them, but the fish were sold into the markets, and thousands of Japanese people got radiation sickness. That is the measure of the callousness and disregard for ordinary people that you see in government. Interesting little story here. Apparently, scientists studying the DNA, a company called DNA Consultants, did DNA testing of the Cherokee Indians living on the Koala Reservation in western North Carolina and find that they're actually from the Middle East. And it may be that they are descendants of captured Turks who were, not Turks. Somebody actually sent in an explanation saying that during the early exploration of the New World, that some freed Middle Eastern prisoners were actually abandoned on the coastline. There had actually been some talk many years ago where the Cherokee language appears to be derived from Hebrew, and it was laughed at the time, but now it looks like Maybe. We don't know as much about history as we think we do. We know in the present day, most of what we think is history is a fiction. It's made up to make some politician look good or some conquered enemy look bad. But we really don't know until we go out and find for ourselves. Apparently, there was an embarrassment. 2 professors from Westchester University did an in-depth analysis into people's ancestries, and one of their participants, Bernard, was very unhappy when the test revealed he wasn't black, he was mainly European. But he thought he was a black guy. So all that discrimination for nothing. All right, there is the music. It is time for me to get out of here. I got things I got to get done this afternoon. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Please share what you learn here with everybody that you know. We're literally fighting a war here, and in the nuclear age, the enemy is war itself. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.